All right, let's jump right in today. We're going deep on a pretty ambitious project, a 3-year plan to build a whole new addiction recovery center in Delaware. It's called Firm Foundation Recovery. And this pamphlet we got, well, it's not your typical proposal.
No, not at all. What strikes me is how community-focused it is. And that long-term approach to addiction recovery, that's something you don't see every day.
Right. This isn't just a quick detox and out the door. They're talking 9 to 18 months. Completely free residential program.
That's huge. I mean, think about the potential impact that could have on someone's life, the chance to really dig deep and address the underlying issues.
Yeah, and speaking of impact, the pamphlet mentions that addiction is the leading cause of death for people aged 18 to 45 in Delaware.
It's a serious crisis, no question about it. And often the existing treatment options just aren't enough. They're too short-term or they don't address the whole picture.
Exactly. And that's where Firm Foundation Recovery comes in. They're not just slapping together a few beds and calling it a day. They're aiming for a full-fledged 54-bed residential center. They want me to address the root causes of addiction, not just the symptoms.
That's a key point because we know addiction is often a symptom of deeper issues. Trauma, mental health struggles, lack of support. You need to address those underlying factors for recovery to really stick.
And here's where things get even more interesting. They're saying they're going to do all of this without relying on traditional funding sources. No government grants, no insurance reimbursements.
That definitely piqued my curiosity. It makes you wonder how they're planning to make it work financially.
Well, that's part of what we're going to unpack in this deep dive. But it seems clear that they're really committed to their principles. They're willing to walk a different path, even if it means facing more challenges.
It's a bold stance.
Mm-hmm.
And it suggests they're very intentional about maintaining their autonomy and their vision for this project.
Yeah, they're essentially saying they're not going to compromise their values for the sake of expediency. So let's get into the nitty-gritty of how they actually plan to bring this vision to life. They've laid out a pretty detailed 3-year plan in this pamphlet. We should walk through that.
All right, let's break it down. Phase 1 in 2024 is all about getting the land. They're aiming for 2 to 10 acres in Kent County.
Securing the land, that's the foundation, literally and figuratively. But it's not as simple as just finding an empty lot, is it? What are some of the hurdles they might encounter in this first phase?
Well, there's the whole zoning process, making sure the land is suitable for the type of facility that they want to build. And then there's the environmental assessment. You have to make sure there are no hidden issues with the site. And then, of course, there's the community aspect.
Ah, right. Not everyone's going to be thrilled about having a recovery center in their backyard.
Exactly. They'll need to do a lot of outreach, build relationships with the neighbors, address any concerns that might come up. It's a crucial part of the process.
So they're not just building a center, they're building trust. And then comes phase 2, 2025. That's when the construction begins. 3 buildings, each 5,000 square feet. That's a pretty sizable project.
It's a huge undertaking. Even with their emphasis on community involvement and using donated resources, there are bound to be unexpected challenges. Construction projects are notorious for delays and cost overruns.
Yeah, keeping everything on track and on budget is going to be a major feat. And then there's phase 3, 2026, which is all about securing that long-term operational funding. Now, remember, they're doing this without the usual sources of revenue.
Right, so they're really leaning into this for Delaware by Delaware concept. They're looking to the community to provide not just financial support, but also expertise, materials, and volunteer hours. It's a grassroots movement, essentially.
It's a bold strategy. It takes a lot of faith in the community's willingness to step up. But they're not just asking for handouts. They're offering something in return, right?
Yeah, absolutely. They're offering hope, the chance for people struggling with addiction to turn their lives around, to become contributing members of society again. And they're saying that by supporting this project, you're investing in the well-being of your community.
So it's an appeal to both compassion and self-interest. But can they actually make it work? Can they really build a sustainable funding model outside the traditional system? That's a question we'll continue to explore.
Absolutely. There's a lot more to uncover here.
And that brings us to another key phrase in their materials: uncompromising principle-based recovery. It really jumps off the page.
It does, doesn't it? There's a certain defiance in those words. It's like they're drawing a line in the sand saying, this is what we stand for, but what does it actually mean in practice?
Yeah, what are the implications of this principle-based approach? How does it shape the program they're offering?
Well, it suggests they're prioritizing their values above all else, even if it means facing more obstacles. But it also raises questions about accessibility. Who will be able to benefit from their services?
So there are trade-offs to consider. They're gaining autonomy, but also taking on a huge responsibility to make sure their program is truly serving the community's needs. We'll delve deeper into these implications in the next part of our deep dive.
Definitely. There's a lot more to unpack here.
Absolutely. But before we move on, I want to touch on the team behind this whole endeavor. The pamphlet highlights the executive team, and it's a pretty interesting mix of backgrounds.
Yeah, there's a real diversity of experience there. It seems like they've assembled a team with the skills and passion to really take this project forward.
It's a good mix. It makes you wonder, though, can they actually pull it off? Will this ambitious vision become a reality? And what kind of impact will it have on the lives of people struggling with addiction? Those are questions we'll tackle in the next part of our deep dive. Stay tuned.
Looking forward to it. All right, picking up where we left off with this whole uncompromising principle-based recovery thing, it's a pretty loaded phrase, isn't it?
Yeah, it definitely caught my attention. What was your first thought when you saw that?
Well, it's clear they're not afraid to go against the grain. This commitment to operate outside traditional funding sources, like government grants and insurance money, that's a pretty big deal, especially in the addiction treatment world.
It is. It makes you wonder, what's driving that decision? Why are they so adamant about staying independent?
I think it comes down to control, really. They want to ensure they're not beholden to any outside influence that could compromise their vision.
You mean like strings attached to funding? Having to conform to certain regulations or protocols?
Exactly. They seem to believe that relying on those traditional sources could force them to make compromises they're not willing to make. It could limit their ability to offer the kind of holistic, individualized care they envision.
So they're choosing autonomy over convenience, even if it means facing more challenges in terms of funding.
Yeah, and that's not an easy choice to make. But it speaks to their conviction. They're saying, this is what we believe in, and we're not going to waver from it, even if it means taking the harder road.
It's a bit like David versus Goliath, in a way.
I see what you mean. They're a small organization taking on a huge challenge, and they're doing it on their own terms.
It's inspiring, but it also makes you wonder, is it realistic? Can they actually make it work without those traditional funding streams? I mean, running a residential center is expensive.
It definitely won't be easy. They're going to have to be incredibly resourceful and tap into every avenue available to them. Individual donations, corporate sponsorships, fundraising events, maybe even social enterprises. They'll need to get creative.
It sounds like they're really banking on the support of the community. That this "for Delaware, by Delaware" idea isn't just a slogan, it's their lifeline.
It has to be. And to their credit, they're not just asking for money, they're offering something in return. A chance for people to invest in the well-being of their community to help break the cycle of addiction and all the suffering that comes with it.
It's a compelling message. And it aligns with that idea of shared responsibility, that we all have a role to play in creating a healthier, more supportive society.
Right. And there's also that spiritual aspect that really stood out to me. They talk about helping residents discover their spiritual and experiential gifting. It's an interesting phrase.
Yeah, it definitely caught my eye too. It makes you wonder how they plan to incorporate spirituality into their program. So it's not about imposing any particular dogma, it's about fostering a sense of meaning and purpose.
Exactly. And that can be incredibly powerful in the recovery process, helping people find a reason to stay sober, to believe in something beyond their addiction.
And it's not just about inward reflection either. They also emphasize service. This servitude living and work program they mention, it sounds like they're trying to integrate personal growth with community contribution.
That's a really interesting concept. It's like they're saying, as you heal, you also help others heal. It's a beautiful idea, really.
It is, and it aligns with that whole restorative justice approach, where people who have caused harm are given the opportunity to make amends and contribute to the community in a positive way.
Right. It's about empowerment, helping people move beyond their past mistakes and become agents of change.
So it's not just about taking, it's about giving back, about recognizing that we're all interconnected and that our actions have ripple effects.
And that kind of mindset can be incredibly transformative, not just for the individuals involved, but for the community as a whole. It creates a sense of shared purpose, a sense of belonging.
I wonder if there are any other programs out there that have successfully combined spirituality and service in this way.
Oh, absolutely. Therapeutic communities and faith-based recovery models have been doing this for decades. They often incorporate communal living, work programs, and spiritual guidance as part of the recovery process. And there's a lot of evidence to suggest that this holistic approach can be very effective.
So firm foundation recovery is drawing on those existing models, but adapting them to their own context and their own vision. It's an interesting blend of tradition and innovation.
It is, and it's definitely worth watching to see how it all unfolds, because if they can make this work, it could have ripple effect far beyond Delaware.
So we're left with a lot of questions, but also a lot of hope. This uncompromising principle-based recovery is a bold experiment, and the outcome is far from certain, but the potential is there for something truly transformative.
It is, and that's what makes this so fascinating. We're witnessing the birth of a new approach, a new way of thinking about addiction recovery.
Okay, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into firm foundation recovery. We've talked about their big ideas, their ambitious plans, but now the rubber meets the road. Can they actually pull this off?
That's the million-dollar question, right? They've got this detailed 3-year plan, but there's some serious hurdles they're going to have to overcome.
Yeah, let's start with that first hurdle, securing the land. 2 to 10 acres in Kent County. That's a pretty specific requirement.
Yeah.
What are the chances they'll actually find what they need?
Well, finding suitable land is one thing, but then there's the whole zoning issue, making sure it's zoned for the type of facility they want to build. And, there's always the possibility of community pushback. Not everyone's going to be happy about having a recovery center as a neighbor.
Right, they're going to need some serious community relations skills right out of the gate. And even if they find the perfect spot and get all the approvals, then there's the construction itself. 3 buildings, 5,000 square feet each. That's not a small undertaking.
No, not at all. Construction projects are notorious for delays, cost overruns, and they're relying heavily on community involvement, donated labor, and materials. That's a lot of moving parts to coordinate.
It's a logistical challenge for sure, but it's also a smart way to build buy-in from the community, right? Get people invested in the project from the ground up.
Exactly. And that's going to be crucial when it comes to the biggest hurdle of all the funding. They're rejecting traditional sources, which means they're going to need a whole lot of community support to keep the lights on.
They're basically betting the farm on this for Delaware by Delaware approach, but can it really work? Can they raise enough money from individual donations and corporate sponsorships to sustain a long-term residential program?
It's a big gamble. But they do have a few things going for them. First, there's a genuine need for this type of facility in Delaware. Addiction is a major problem, and there aren't enough resources to help everyone who needs it.
So they're tapping into a real sense of urgency.
Right. And they're also offering something unique, this holistic, principle-based approach that really resonates with people who are looking for alternatives to the traditional medical model.
It's that uncompromising, principle-based recovery thing we talked about. They're not just offering a bed and some therapy. They're offering a chance to transform your life.
Exactly. And they're doing it in a way that honors the individual, their beliefs, their needs. It's a very personal approach, and I think that's what appeals to people.
But it's also what makes it so challenging, because how do you measure success when you're dealing with something as complex as addiction recovery? How do you prove that your model is working?
That's a great question. And it's something they're going to have to figure out.
Yeah.
Because they're going to be under a lot of scrutiny. People are going to want to see results. They're going to want to know that their donations are making a difference.
So transparency is going to be key.
Absolutely. They need to be open about their methods, their outcomes, their challenges, and they need to be accountable to the community, to the people they serve.
They've set a high bar for themselves. But if they can pull this off, if they can create a truly effective, sustainable, and community-driven recovery center, the impact could be enormous.
No question about it. It could be a game changer, not just for Delaware, but for the whole field of addiction treatment. It's a bold experiment, and we'll be watching closely to see how it unfolds.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We've explored their vision, their plan, their challenges, their potential. And I think one thing is clear. Firm foundation recovery is a story worth watching.